In the last episode, I talked about the four main phases of U.S. and China relations from 1941 to the present. In this episode, I'd like to review the grand policies of each U.S. administration toward rising China, reflecting its concerns over China's growing economic, military, and geopolitical influence. As we already know, the competition between the United States and China is multifaceted, covering a range of issues. At its core, the competition reflects the growing global influence and power of China, which is challenging the United States' traditional dominance in a range of areas, particularly in areas such as artificial intelligence, 5G networks, and quantum computing, which could give China a strategic advantage in the future. Let's go briefly on the strategies that the U.S. has been pursuing in contemporary relations by looking at the comprehensive engagement policy of Bill Clinton's administration, whose purpose is to build mutual confidence and agreement in areas where U.S. interests converge with those of China. The U.S. has pursued a policy of engagement with China since the 1970s, seeking to integrate China into the global economy and encouraging its peaceful rise as a responsible stakeholder in the international system. This policy was based on the assumption that as China became more prosperous and integrated into the global community, it would become more democratic and more aligned with the U.S.-led international order. George W. Bush administration. During the presidential campaign, George W. Bush used to view China as a strategic competitor. President George W. Bush's first National Security Strategy Report, released by the White House on September 20, 2002, the 33-page document actually represents a new and comprehensive strategic vision designed to meet the challenges of the post-9/11 world. The U.S. has shifted its focus from engagement to containment, viewing China as a strategic competitor and a revisionist power that seeks to challenge the U.S.-led international order. However, the Bush administration's stance seems more grounded in the engagement and promotion of economic and trade ties with China. Despite its mixed approach, the U.S. has also been seeking areas of cooperation with China, particularly on global issues such as climate change, nuclear proliferation, and the fight against terrorism. The Obama administration. During his term, Obama's pivot or rebalancing policy to Asia should discuss. It is rooted in an article entitled America's Pacific Century, written by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and was published in Foreign Policy in October 2011. Obama developed its policy of rebalancing or pivot to Asia to advance America's security and economic interests in the region and to specific initiatives like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This policy was overwhelmingly received by many U.S. allies and friends in the region. Beijing has perceived it as a Cold War syndrome, aiming at the U.S. containment to China. The Trump administration. During his presidency, Donald Trump implemented a range of policies aimed at addressing what he perceived as unfair trade practices and other issues related to China. Trump's policy toward China was characterized by a more confrontational approach, with a focus on reducing the trade deficit, increasing tariffs, and limiting Chinese access to sensitive technology. Surprisingly, Trump has drastically deviated from the traditional U.S. grand strategy. Since the Cold War ended, Democratic and Republican administrations alike have pursued a grand strategy that scholars have called liberal hegemony. However, the Trump administration try a bit harder. America First is the major theme in his foreign policy that places American national interests ahead of all others. Since taking office as U.S. president, Trump has made a series of unilateral decisions with enormous consequences. He walked away from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the Iran nuclear deal. He imposed tariffs on Canada, China, Mexico, and the European Union. Moreover, we see in the National Security Strategy released in 2017, the administration considers China seeks to displace the United States in the Indo-Pacific region. In addition, President Trump signed into law the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act of 2018, which provides a broad statement of U.S. policy for the Indo-Pacific region. The act shows the administration's approach to China as its real strategic competitor. One of Trump's major actions was to impose tariffs on Chinese goods, which led to a trade war between the two countries. Trump also signed the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, which imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and entities involved in the suppression of democracy in Hong Kong. In addition, Trump took steps to restrict Chinese access to American technology, particularly in the areas of telecommunications and artificial intelligence. Take the Indo-Pacific strategy as an example. In the words of the Trump administration, the Indo-Pacific designates a region that extends from the Indian shores to the Pacific coast of the United States. In the last few years, when mentioning the word Indo-Pacific, the U.S. always likes to add up the word strategy. The United States aims to level of cooperation with allies and partners in the region. We all might remember an important meeting in Tokyo, presided by Michael R. Pompeo, U.S. Secretary of State, ministers of Australia, India, and Japan. Then Pompeo traveled to East Asia like India, then tripped to Southeast Asia like Indonesia and Vietnam. Pompeo always raised the Indo-Pacific strategy in all meetings. According to his word, it must be a response of the regional countries to protect freedom of navigation and to respond to any threats that aim to change the status quo. Also, the Global Times, an English-language Chinese newspaper, evaluates that the Trump administration has transformed Obama's Asia-Pacific rebalancing strategy into the current Indo-Pacific strategy. Of course, Indo-Pacific strategy is a little NATO that the U.S. has been promoting to counter China's growing influence in the region. This strategy seeks to strengthen U.S. alliances and partnerships in the region, promote economic integration and development, and enhance military cooperation to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. The Biden administration's policy toward China is still taking shape, but some key themes have emerged. Like the Trump administration, the Biden administration sees China as a strategic competitor and has emphasized the need to address a range of economic, security, and human rights issues related to China. One of Biden's early actions was to conduct a review of U.S. policy toward China, which resulted in a report outlining a range of areas where the U.S. needs to be more competitive, including technology, economic policy, and national security. Biden has also emphasized the importance of working with allies and partners to address shared concerns about China. In terms of specific policy actions, the Biden administration has continued to maintain tariffs on Chinese goods, but has also sought to de-escalate tensions in the trade relationship. The administration has also taken steps to address human rights issues in China, including imposing sanctions on Chinese officials involved in the suppression of democracy in Hong Kong and the treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Overall, the Biden administration's policy toward China is characterized by a continued emphasis on competition and addressing a range of issues related to China, but with a greater focus on working with allies and partners and taking a more measured and multilateral approach than the Trump administration. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay updated with my latest content.